A new day for Florida gambling dawned last week with a major expansion of both the types of games offered and the ease of accessing them. The expansion was approved by the state in 2021 as part of a multi-billion-dollar agreement with the Seminole Tribe of Florida. But the deal spent nearly 3 years in legal limbo until last Monday when South Florida casinos relaunched online sports betting, as well as table games, including roulette. I'm joined today by Mitch Stone, criminal defense attorney with an extensive experience in cases involving gambling. Mitch, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ann.
And we're going to be joined in a bit by Dr. Christina Cauffield, CEO of Behavioral Health at LSF Health Systems. To our listeners, though, do you participate in sports gambling, and will you do it more often now that it's available online? We want to hear from you. Call us at 549-2937, email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or message us on Facebook or Instagram. You can also tag us on X at FCC On Air. So, Mitch, let's start with the history of this. There are certain types of gambling that have been permitted in Florida for decades. I'm thinking here about bingo, certain card rooms like Best Bet here in Jacksonville, even the Florida Lottery. So
Sure.
how is this
Dog tracks
different?
and
Dog
highlight.
tracks. Right. How is this different?
Well, this brings in, first of all, the compact brings in Class 3, so it allows for the Indian casinos the Seminole compact allows for them to have actual full gaming tables. So craps, roulette,
We'll talk about.
they already had cards.
Yeah. So this is an expansion at the Seminole Reservation.
Correct.
Explain what the compact is. So that's an agreement between the state and the Seminole Tribe that was years in the making and then finally approved in 2021, in April 2021.
Right. They have, they pretty much run gambling in Florida now. They have casinos, you obviously know the Hard Rock down in Fort Lauderdale area. There's other Indian tribes like the Miccosukee that have different casino down in Miami, but that does not have the Class 3 tables.
And Class 3, again, that's a more advanced level of gambling.
Craps, roulette, those type of gaming that you would see in Las Vegas.
Kind of that style, right. And so this deal, in exchange for allowing the Seminole Tribe to have and offer these kinds of games, the tribe is providing many, many billions of dollars in payments to the state of Florida. And that's sort of the essence of the compact.
Right. I think it's like $2.5 billion a year or something. It's a lot.
A lot of money. And so the state will start collecting that money again now that the gambling has rolled out. But this basically kicked off last Monday. So we had several Seminole casinos. They rolled out the new gambling options with a really star-studded event. They had a huge number of celebrities show up. And I was watching Saturday Night Live this weekend, and there was this ad that they played that really kind of took me aback. A minute long, super celebratory. Let's hear a little bit about that of that ad. So obviously making a big splash. There's a lot of money in this.
Oh, yeah. Gambling is huge, obviously. Everybody in Florida has been exposed to gambling in some way, shape, or form. We all understand that Florida is very friendly to gambling. We have the lottery, we've had dogs, horses, and high life forever. Card rooms opened up, So we have Chapter 849 is the Florida statute regarding gambling, and it has been amended over the years. And then, of course, we had the, 2018 amendment that basically said if you're going to expand gambling, it has to be a voter-approved situation.
And yet we have this big expansion. And sports online betting is a different deal altogether.
Right. When you look back and you see, FanDuels and those type of companies that were using essentially the fantasy football type platform to create online gambling, the floodgates kind of opened up when you saw that was now going to happen. And, I would say not as much my generation as the next generation with their phones, everybody was placing bets in some way online using these platforms. So it was just a matter of time before they realized that sportsbook betting was going to happen. And it already happens. People have ways of doing that, whether it's legal or not. It's very hard to regulate.
But this is obviously going to be a big deal, and they're promoting it with a lot of resources. Um, you have represented people in the world of gambling, so you're pretty familiar with the gambling laws. But in addition to the lottery, there are some forms that have been outright banned. Internet cafe gambling is still banned.
That's a good question because there's all the iterations of what they call internet cafe gambling. It's really less internet cafes and more just different types of games and how they're run. And when you look at the games that we're talking about, a lot of the games we're dealing with are iterations of sweepstakes, iterations of actual gambling, games that of chance versus games of skill, that type of thing. So, and then other gambling interests try to shut those down by lobbying different law enforcement legislators to, hey, we need to close this gap because they want to control the gambling. That's why a lot of the issue, when you look at these lawsuits, involves one gambling company versus the Seminole Tribe or the state of Florida because of the interstate compact that allowed for the full Class 3 gambling tables to come into those casinos. And now they're talking about what the ruling basically is that because the servers are on tribal land and the bets are going through the phone onto those servers, it's legal. That's a good question.
I mean, it's a really novel legal argument. So what they're saying is, and this is a case, this is the federal case. Basically, the attorneys for the Seminole Tribe have argued that they're allowed to, offer this sports betting in Florida through this app because the servers that run the app are on the reservation. Is there any legal precedent for that kind of an argument to say that because, for instance, an act occurs on via computer, that if the computer is located in a certain place or the server that runs the computer is located in a certain place, that the quote unquote crime occurred in that place? It just seems like such a step away from legal standards.
Yeah, computer related crimes, and I've handled, a lot of the different types of computer crimes, whether it's fraud related or pornography related or something of that nature. Or in these days you have, underage people getting onto these platforms like OnlyFans. I mean, these are all legally challenging issues because where does the crime actually occur? And the answer to that is pretty easy in the federal system because once you have interstate commerce, once you affect interstate commerce, meaning literally I handled a case one time where a pizzeria was robbed, and because the tomato sauce came from California, they decided that there was an interstate nexus. So very easy to solve that problem in the federal side. On the state side, a little bit more difficult because you're dealing with where did the actual crime occur. Was it where the person was standing using his phone, or was it where the server exists? And they can usually solve that by just figuring out where they want to file the lawsuit or the criminal action, and then that gets litigated.
So we're joined now by Dr. Christina Cauffield. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. You
Pleasure.
have an expertise in addictions, including gambling addictions. We spoke, Mitch and I, a moment ago about how this unleashing of gambling in Florida has been accompanied by a big push, including a lot of celebrities. They had a red carpet event last Monday at several Seminole casinos. There was John Bon Jovi, Bruno Mars, Gloria Estefan, Mike Tyson, Dwayne Wade, like a lot of really, A-list names there to help promote the launch of these new games and then also the sporting app. So does that level of celebrity endorsement present problems from the perspective of gambling addiction?
Absolutely, it certainly does. And I think a lot of these operators are wanting to attract young people. And what we're seeing at LSF Health Systems is that youth, age 21 to 25 in particular, are really drawn, especially to sports betting. That has really skyrocketed. And with that comes a lot of impulsivity and the urge to continue making bigger bets. It's very much a gambling addiction like any other addiction. It takes more and more to get that high, if you will. So our gamblers build up tolerance and needs more excitement, if you will, to get that adrenaline rush. And so we're very concerned, especially with the young people, because as you may know, adult brains don't fully form. They're not fully formed and functioning appropriately, especially with males, until age 25. So the prefrontal cortex of the brain that controls impulsivity and decision making is not fully formed. So we have these young people that are very impulsive, that want to engage in this exciting rush, and thereby it can very, very soon turn into a gambling addiction.
It's interesting. I haven't heard previously about gambling addiction being progressive in that way. To our listeners, we invite you, if you've ever participated in online gambling or gambling in general, if you've ever had a problem with gambling or know somebody that has experienced that, we'd like to hear from you. Call us at 549-2937 or send us an email to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also reach out via social media platforms. And so on that front, Dr. Cauffield, when people are first experimenting with gambling, I mean, they're not supposed to participate, as Mitch said, if they're under 18.
Correct.
Is that something that's easy for young people to elude that requirement in an online setting?
Most definitely, especially through apps. We find that a lot of young people, middle school, high schoolers, are getting into the gambling craze, if you will. They're betting on sports scores. They're betting on how many times, for example, the Super Bowl is the halftime show. What time is that going to start? Those kinds of things. And, again, experiencing the rush, experiencing small wins, and this progresses into wanting bigger and bigger wins. The factor that is really keeping people hooked is what we call in the field intermittent reinforcement. So they gamble, maybe small wins, maybe no wins, and then they get a bigger win. And so that really reinforces them to keep going. They knew they were going to hit it big. They're going to continue gambling. They're an expert in it. And so that intermittent reinforcement really is the calling card, if you will, for individuals that are hooked on gambling.
Are there certain personality types that are more susceptible? I mean, I know you said demographically, you're talking mostly about young men, primarily being susceptible, but is there a certain personality type that is more susceptible?
Yes. In fact, we're doing a lot of good research in the field now, and we're finding that there's a genetic component. We're finding that most gamblers, in fact, 90%, have a co-occurring either mental health or substance use disorder. And that's why if you've ever been to Las Vegas and there's lots of cocktail waitresses serving liquor where people are gambling, it's, again, let's lower that impulse control, let's feed that co-occurring addiction, and let's have the monies roll in. So it's very concerning. And we also find people, for example, with mental health disorders, depression, high stress. We also find that individuals that are addicted to drugs or alcohol also are predisposed, if you will, to a gambling addiction.
We've got a call now. Seth in Riverside. Good morning, Seth. Welcome to First Coast Connect.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to comment on the situation, both as a consumer and as a taxpayer. I recognize that there are lots of issues with gambling, and I am a casual gambler myself. I enjoy sports betting. I think of it as kind of a challenge, and the saying is, I only do it with pizza money. But the two problems I have with the way it's done in the state are, one, as a consumer, and two, as a taxpayer. First of all, as a consumer of sports betting, the fact that the Seminole Tribe has a monopoly means that I'm not getting as good odds, and I've seen that on the sports book where there's much better odds elsewhere, and you're just getting whatever they can offer because they have a monopoly. And two, you're not getting as good promotions. And then another thing, really a secondary issue, is just as a taxpayer, it seems like it's a real sweetheart deal where they're getting this monopoly, but the revenue share for the state is pretty meager compared to all the states that have had kind of competitive issuances of sports betting licenses where the state's getting as much as a 51% revenue share, and I think Florida it's somewhere around 10%. So, aside from all the other issues, it's and again, pro sports bettor, casual sports bettor fan myself, as a consumer of sports betting and as a taxpayer in Florida, kind of getting a raw deal with the Seminole Tribe having this monopoly.
Thanks, Seth. And I would just ask you because, I mean, the deal is an estimated $20 billion over 3 decades that the Seminole Tribe has agreed to give the state. But you're saying that you think a revenue share would have been more beneficial for Florida.
Yeah, and you can look it up. I'm sure someone on at WJCT would do a better job than I. But when states have opened up a competitive bidding process to allow licenses for sports betting, they've gotten as far as 51% of the revenue share to the state. And the analysis that I've seen is that the Florida revenue share will be somewhere between 10 and 15%, more likely 10.
Gotcha.
So that's So there's tens and tens of billions of dollars that are being left on the table for the state that are just going to the tribe.
Thanks. Thank you, Seth. Appreciate your call. Mitch, is the money for the state what it drives a deal like this? Or are there other considerations? I mean, the Seminole Tribe has its sovereignty to do this kind of gambling under federal law. They are permitted to make those calls on their own without necessarily being micromanaged and regulated at the state level.
Right. I mean, the Seminoles chose to enter into the compact. I think the Miccosukes didn't, so they're relegated to the Class 2 gambling at the Miccosukee Casino. But in the Seminoles obviously have a much greater stake, and they kind of run the show. And I agree. I mean, there's a ton of money in it. Whether we made a good deal or not, I don't know. I mean, time will tell. But the interesting thing is they didn't roll out the gaming tables right after immediately. They waited for that initial ruling in December. But now they're rolling it out, and there's going to be, Florida is a vacation area, and people like to come, and people like to gamble, much like they like to go to Las Vegas. It's something to do. Some people can control their impulses, some people can't. So you're going to have the problem that existed back when gambling was legal in Florida, and we had casinos in Miami Beach and the Treasure Coast and places like that, was that it depressed the areas. The population didn't want it, and so they basically outlawed it. And now that it's coming back, they never outlawed gambling entirely in Florida. It's always been here, and without these kind of games, you're going to have the same type of people with these impulses, maybe going and buying 100 scratch-off tickets because that gives them the same rush. If it's your retirement plan, probably not a good idea. If you're just doing it for fun, for a little bit of entertainment value, and you can afford to lose whatever you're bringing to the show, great. But a lot of people get, as we know, a lot of people can't control themselves and get way past the point where they can actually afford what they're doing. And then we have, what did we see? This fella from the Jaguars who allegedly gambled away $22 million of someone else's money. I mean, that's pretty crazy when you get into that. But I agree. I think that people start chasing that. They think if I can just win that one last bet, I'm going to be back to even. And we see that all the time. But as far as the state is concerned and the law is concerned, it's extremely difficult to enforce the laws of gambling because we have internet access and telephones, and people can, they can access bookies, they can access places where that'll take their bets just by pointing and clicking. So how do you stop that?
And you're referring to, of course, there was a guy who pleaded guilty last week to basically taking $22 million from the Jaguars. He conceded, acknowledged that he had a sports betting addiction. And so that was the primary driver of why he was, taking that money. He was also spending it on some luxury items. But it sounded like, the big debt there was that he was losing money.
Sure. And I mean, when you look at another platform like cryptocurrency platforms, I mean, to a degree, people are raising funds in order to fund a business. That's the whole idea of cryptocurrencies. But what it morphed into is just kind of pumping and dumping, people jumping into something, hoping that other people jump in almost like a Ponzi scheme and get out before it goes bust. And so you're constantly on your phone gambling, looking at, is this coin going to make it? Is that coin going to make it? I lost 1,000 here. I won, I got 3,000 there. So I'm still ahead of the game. And that's, you kind of get into that where you can't really get out of it. You just keep going because you're trying to chase that dollar. And the state has a tough time enforcing that. It's incredibly difficult to find the people who are doing it and to arrest and prosecute.
We've got a caller. Stephanie from Riverside is joining us. Good morning, Stephanie.
Good morning.
Go ahead. Welcome.
I wanted to ask you to speak to one of the other issues about this, and I was inspired to call by a previous caller who was complaining about the monopoly status that the Seminole hold, as well as what they considered to be not enough of a payout to the state. And I want to bring in this very complex historical issue of the way that indigenous communities and indigenous bodies have been, manipulated and coerced through predominantly, powerful white communities in the South to get them addicted to substances and get them addicted to gambling so they could take their land. And so now we're basically saying, okay, you can make money how you deem fit, but you still owe us a lot of money, and it's up to us to decide how you're able to operate. And so seeing this more as a continuation of economic colonialism.
Interesting. Thank you, Stephanie.
Speak to that, please.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks. I'm not sure that that's something that I directly can speak to, but I mean, clearly there's a long history of exploitation of indigenous people. I think a lot of people in the tribe, I wouldn't speak for them, but I do believe that this is a considered economic tool, that is available to them because of their status as, unique, and having that under the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, having that right to, utilize gambling to raise money for their own uses.
Yeah, and I respect what the caller is talking about, but I think it kind of goes in reverse here. I think that the tribes realize that if you're going to put us on reservations and declare it a separate country almost, that we're going to be able to do the kind of things that we want to do to make money, and one of those things is gambling. I do believe that people who are members of the tribe cannot gamble in those casinos. And so the idea is that they're offering this to other people to come in and spend their money so that they can make a ton of money, and they do. I mean, if you watch a Miami Marlins baseball game, the Miccosukee tribe pretty much advertises the entire game, and I know that they have a big interest in that. So they've made a lot of money, and they're not even class 3 in terms of gambling. So there's a lot of money to be made. I don't know if it's exploiting indigenous populations or however you want to look at it that way, but this is a very lucrative situation for the Seminole tribe, and it's lucrative for other tribes that aren't even in the compact. The compact was done. I mean, the Seminoles wanted the compact, and the state of Florida, obviously, I mean, it took them this long to finally come to those terms, but they're going to make a considerable amount of money, and it's for their population to thrive. So I don't think you're going to get any pushback in that direction.
Dr. Cauffield, so it's obviously lucrative. There's a lot of money, but there's also costs, right? I mean, people who become addicted to gambling, not only do they necessarily rip off their employers, like the gentleman that worked for the Jags, but they have costs to their family, to their job stability, to their mental health.
Absolutely. And there's so many social issues that occur as a result of it. Um, a lot of our folks that are addicted to gambling lose their relationships, lose their family because there's a divorce. The spouse can't stand watching this and doing without for themselves and their family. And so there's often, fractured relationships. Oftentimes the homes are lost because the gambler chooses to either take out an additional mortgage or put it up for the bid, cars, you name it. And so oftentimes these individuals become homeless. And so there's that social situation where the state then absorbs their care. Their mental health deteriorates. A lot of times there's suicidal thoughts as they realize that they've lost everything, so to speak. So there's so many complications and consequences when the gambling addiction gets out of control.
And Mitch, not just those kind of costs societally, but we've talked about how gambling is considered sort of a regressive tax on a community. Explain that.
Well, like I was talking about before, I mean, your traditional way of work and savings and preparing for retirement, those things people are encouraged to do. And if your retirement plan is to try to, take the money you have in your IRA and gamble it to try to triple or quadruple or 10 times it, that's probably not a great idea because, anyone who's ever been to a casino knows the longer you stay, the more likely it is that you're going to give anything back that you won and more. And so the whole concept is entertainment. But some people just can't control themselves. And so you're going to have people who really can't afford, when we talk about gambling, you say, well, if you've got, an extra couple $100 when you go on vacation, you want to go to the casino or you want to go to the dog track or the card room, and that's what you're going to gamble. Okay. If you understand that, you could lose that. But if you can afford to lose that, that's great. You're just paying for the entertainment value. But when it becomes that's your money that you're counting on to pay for your, put food on the table and make sure your kids are clothed and can go to school, and you're gambling that to try to do better, and you lose that, well, now you're putting yourself in a much higher risk of failing, and it's unfortunate. So they consider it a regressive tax. They've talked about the lottery as a regressive tax.
Sure.
I mean, people will take their extra $20 instead of buying something of value. They're going to go buy a lottery ticket, scratch it off, and hope to win $1 million.
Well, we know for those of you out there, if you know somebody with a gambling problem or you yourself have a gambling problem, you can call 1-800-GAMBLER. Christine Cauffield, Mitch Stone, thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.